This
Somebody,
conference will now be recorded.
okay.
Good. Well, the
If,
first item we'll
if somebody
address,
calls in, do they identify themselves?
we can usually tell if somebody's dials in. There'll be a column on the right with with just a call-in number. So I think I had asked Brad to dial in. The town board has two issues tonight on their agenda that they are going to need some direction as to what we're thinking. And the first one I'm going to bring up is just the Mirror Lake sidewalk. And the issue that I think we're all trying to get to is based on the bids. There were 4 bids received, and I think you all received copies of the bids. There was 3 options. One was paver stones. One was using just a concrete sidewalk with granite curbing, and then the third option was concrete with a stamped surface. Obviously, the alternate A, which is the concrete, is the least costly. And what you're looking at, I believe that you've received was a copy of the letter that Ivan put out that analyzed all of the 4 bids. Hi, Jason. So the low bidder in all cases was a company called HMA Contracting Corporation, and that appears to be the bid that Ivan is recommending. And I think the only option that's left for us at this point would be to determine what our preference is for the material to be used. And alternate A is going with concrete. The only change that in talking with Brad that would be considered, and Brad is on the line, I believe, listening.
Yes, I am.
$568,459 and change. That's concrete only. There would be a slight change in it because they were going to add color to the concrete so that the concrete wouldn't have just a surface color, but would actually be colored throughout. The alternate B was using concrete with a stamped surface. Again, HMA's the low bidder came out at $650,545, which is the village's piece. Only difference there being that the top would be stamped with a pattern, and then from concrete, and then the paver stone bid using, I believe, the Permacon pavers art came in at $830,274 and change. So I think at this point, the only real issue we have to decide is which of the 3 options are we as a village board inclined to want to go with. I would say this too, that I don't believe that it would be impossible for the village to opt for one material and the town another, but I'm inclined to think that it would be nicer if we can come together on what material we're going to use. I do know from talking with the supervisor that there seems to be a leaning, and again, their section of the sidewalk is about double what ours is, so you can understand there's a cost consideration here. And in the last conversations I had at the end of the week with Supervisor Rand, he indicated that he was leaning toward concrete and didn't think that there would be a difference of opinion from the other councilmen. So with that said, any comments from anybody? The reason why this is coming up is that the town board meets tonight. It's their April meeting, and we're anxious to get this project out to bid as soon as we can. If we miss tonight, then the town's next meeting would be in May, which is a month later. Any thoughts? Scott?
I'm in favor of the concrete.
Art?
Same.
Jason?
You're muted.
You're muted.
I'm muted?
No,
Jason.
Jason's muted.
His
Oh,
eyes
okay.
on.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I know I came in just a little bit. What are we doing for Main Street?
Main Street is a different product. At the moment, we're hoping and planning to use a granite, which I think you've seen samples of here in the office. That's a completely separate project that, and again, who knows where we'll be on that product. But for the lake itself, and ultimately, I think, well, we'll leave the Cambridge pavers down for the time being. When those are replaced, those would be matched up with the rest of the lake sidewalk. And I believe Brad has indicated that he's hoping that we can color the concrete in a darker color. The primary reason being that when sunlight hits it, it melts quicker and it requires maybe less road salt in the future. That's another reason for not going with the stamp surface too, is that the smooth surface cement walk actually will over time will require less salt, and you won't have seams that you would have with pavers or with a stamp surface where the salt may congregate and deteriorate the finish faster.
What would, when you say darker, are we looking at the red that
No,
kind of is in front of Lisa G's? Is that what kind of
No.
what kind of aesthetic are we gonna, what is the thought process
Right.
that we
Brad,
want?
can you respond to that?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
What we're looking at right now is Jay, the supervisor, asked me to look into coloring because that's what the town wanted to go with. I stressed to him that we maybe go with something darker if you're going to try to color it, just because we don't want it to look like Disneyland looking too bright. Something that, if you've been by Greg Bozolari's house, that's the red colored concrete. It's not something that I think would be appealing around the lake. So I figured if we went with a darker color, maybe a darker gray or an earth tone, probably just darken up the gray so that those pieces of granite that show the peaks and the elevations would stand out a little more. So they're not
Okay.
like blended into the concrete. But nothing, I don't believe anything red or anything that would be a yellow or even a tan color. I guess you could look at brown colors. I've been trying to get some samples. A.H. Harris and Plattsburgh can get basically any color that we want. We just add it on site. That would be an afterthought after you pick what you want to do. The color can come after. We're going to have to pay for that ourselves because we did not put that in the bid. If you go with alternate A, that is just concrete. That's just regular broom finished concrete. And then the color would add in after, and it wouldn't be much. It would just be bags of powder that we'd add to the truckloads as they came in.
Okay.
so Brad, I was under understanding that it would be mixed thoroughly through the concrete. That's not the case?
Yes, you add it to the truck and it mixes
to
it
the
into the
truck.
concrete.
Okay.
Yeah.
When the mix
Well,
of water, okay.
It
Good.
doesn't come out of the plant. They don't add it in the plant. They put it in the truck and then they dump this powder in and they mix it in the truck on the way over.
Okay, perfect.
What
And it would be all
would,
the way through it.
Brad, what would be the probability of sort of an uneven sort of an inconsistency in the sort of the color using concrete, like as we go around the lake, the whole 2.7 miles?
Well, I believe you'd add the same amount to each batch. So if each truck had 5 yards of concrete and you added the same amount of powder to each load and you mixed it for the same amount of time with the same amount of water, it should theoretically be close to the same. That's why that's why if I was going to choose a color, if you're going to go with color, we're not saying we have to. That's why we don't want to go with any crazy colors. Just go with something that's maybe the color of concrete when it's wet. As concrete dries, it turns really light gray. Maybe darken it up just enough to add, or if there's something else, once I get the color cards from them, we can look at what we want to do. But that's one thing that you're going to have to watch. It's going to have to make sure that we're mixing each batch the same, or it will come out differently.
Okay. And with the color that you're anticipating, would it complement what eventually could be the granite on Main Street? And is that the goal?
Well, I don't think, yeah, I mean, I guess you could look at it like that, but I don't know what you're actually even looking at for color yet. Right now, that bid right there, that if we award that bid, that is just straight concrete. The color isn't something that we can make our mind up afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. We'll have an opportunity, Jason, to look at the color samples, and I sympathize with your thought that we want to maybe have it reasonably close, and we don't know that wouldn't be a possibility, depending on the different colors that are available for mix. But today's decision, we just have to make a determination about which option the village board would prefer to go with, and I think it's consistent. Peter, I didn't hear you say this, but I think you're okay with concrete.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we seal it in October before the winter.
Okay, well, that clearly would be another after this decision issue. So is it okay if I advise the supervisor, for the sake of the village board, that at our next meeting we will go with the option A, or alternate A, which is the concrete piece, with the provisions that we're going to look at colors and maybe sealing.
Because I feel like and maybe everyone's like, economically now, the difference in price is, it's a necessity to save $300,000. I'd hate for the town to dictate what color it's going to be. Hopefully we can agree on a mutual color.
I'll
Is
certainly
that the
convey
sense you got, Mayor?
Yes, I'll convey that thought to Jay for tonight's meeting, just so that they're at least aware of it and that they've heard it.
Okay.
Because as much as anybody, we want it to be a fairly classy looking piece of work when it's done, and it would be nice if we could coordinate it in a manner that it won't be a dramatic appearance that's different from what Main Street ultimately will be. And Main Street's going to have if we use the granite that we're looking at, is going to be a darker, almost greenish surface.
Okay.
So a dark surface that is close to that would be what we might be looking for.
Okay.
Actually, the stuff coming out of Ausable, it's called green, but it really doesn't have green in it. It's more of a dark gray. I think it'll complement it very well, depending on what we can find.
Okay. But we can work on that project after Brad gets some color charts, so that we can compare it. And probably, like everything else, we'll pick a color that looks identical and then find out it's really not. But,
Not available.
right.
So you've done, and I apologize, and I hate to prolong this particular part, because I know we have another meeting. You spoke with the supervisor too, and because this was your baby, and you have done quite a bit of research, and you are comfortable moving in this direction.
Well, obviously the bricks would have looked nicer. There's pros and cons to both. But I think, given the economic uncertainty of what's coming up, we just don't know. And the difference, I think, is 261,000, 262. There's other places we can put our money.
Okay, that's fine.
And one of the big benefits is, as Craig said, if you ask anybody, cement takes half the salt that bricks do. And given the sensitivity of where this sidewalk is around Mirror Lake, one of the very few lakes in the whole park that has a road all the way around it, it's just icing on the cake.
All right, sounds good with me.
Okay,
Although,
with that said, I'd like to move on to this.
Looking at the bricks would probably work out to be about the same price and, be nicer, but you're looking at the long run, 40 years versus 2025.
Yeah.
True. I'd like to move on to the second topic, which Janet will lead off on. And the town board is dealing both with the sidewalk issue, and then there's a couple of guidance issues on the short-term vacation rental. So Janet, you've got the floor.
Okay, so as with any rollout of any new local law with as many details in it as probably the short-term rental law has, there's a few curveballs, some of which, or most of which, have been thrown at us as a result of the current climate we're in, i.e. COVID. And so for example, the STR local law requires that an applicant provide proof that their chimney and flue have been cleaned and serviced within 90 days of the date they apply. They also have to have a site plan drawn to scale. They have to have a septic report, also written report, also dated within 90 days of the date they apply, which is more than just, oh, we had it pumped out. There has to be the specifications of the system and a certification that's working correctly. So the way it's presently presented is the local law went into effect on March 16th. People have until, it will not be enforced until June 17th. The idea there, giving people 90 days to get their applications in and approved. But what's happening is that given executive orders and non-essential services orders, getting a septic inspection, getting your chimney and flue inspected and cleaned, and is not too readily available or practical. So it may not be that people can have that part of their applications completed here within this next couple months. Also, with regard to a site plan, it's questionable whether we want these people coming up and walking around and trying to come up with a site plan of their property. So from a practical standpoint, it's a problem. And it's not necessarily a problem we created. It's a problem that's been created out of the situation that we find ourselves in. So what we're thinking of, and what Ron and I have been talking about, and we're looking at giving the building department guidance, is that we tell the people, no, you have to have your applications completed as much as possible, and then there could be an extension given for a chimney certification, septic certification, and site plan if they are unable to get those components done in time. As you know, there's only so many surveyors, there's only so many septic companies, there's only so many chimney sweeps. So that's what we're thinking of giving guidance to the building department. Otherwise, it's possible that there wouldn't be able to be that everybody would be in violation because they couldn't complete their application. Now, maybe they can if things loosen up, but right now that's not looking like something that can be done from a practical standpoint. So the town board and the village board, we're looking for your guidance that to the building office, that allowing an extension of those three components, either one, two, or all of them, to somebody, provided that they meet all of the other requirements, would be something that you would be okay with, and giving Mike that latitude. So
I'm
that's
good with it. I'm good with it.
okay. Thank you. Anybody else have a thought?
Any suggestion, Janet, as to what the length of that extension might be, or are we going to leave that to the discretion of the?
I think we let Mike do it. I think he will have a sense that if people are just, not paying any attention to it, and I think that he'll be able to call them up and remind them. I think the other factor will be when some of these restrictions are lifted. I mean, if they got lifted tomorrow, maybe we would be giving a week extension, if any. But if they don't get lifted until, I don't know, May, I'm not sure where that leaves us.
Well, if Mike were to issue a conditional permit conditioned upon those being subsequently provided, he still has the ability to revoke that.
That's absolutely correct, because remember, what we're saying is that all we're deferring till June 17th is enforcement if you don't have a permit. So I like your idea that this is a conditional permit, conditioned upon completion of the application.
Right.
And he can, and I think it's going to be a moving target. But we can continue also, I think, to give him guidance to say, okay, everybody's all, it's all open now. Let's keep people's feet to the fire.
Okay, I think I can support that.
So the second unintended consequence is, and I think we had talked about this in the course of talking over the last couple of years about the local law and recognizing that it wasn't going to go into effect on January 1st of any year, that we'd be in the middle or some point of the calendar year. Because remember, the 90-day limit, which applies to non-hosted, non-Main Street, non-HOA condominium association properties, that we've got a 90-day period. We really never did settle on, okay, do they get 90 days from the date the local law goes into effect? How do we count the bookings, the reservations that they had already prior to the law going into effect? And one thought would be is we can't really tell them, okay, you've got contracts and now under this local law, you can't honor those contracts. That would be a violation and that of the Constitution. So one thought is to say, okay, this is a year where we're split. We've got a hybrid. We're ramping into this new local law. Why don't we, and everybody will be a little bit different, but why don't we just try to make everything uniform and say from January 1, 2020 to December 31, 2020, you can have, for those types of properties that are limited to the 90 days, that you can have 120 days. That takes into account some of these places would have already had rentals over the winter, probably, who knows how many days they had. They've already probably got bookings in through the summer, all the way through next Christmas, because remember, the Christmas week would still be in 2020. We don't have a way to count the days they've had, to know what bookings they had as of March 16th. And also to be able to say, okay, it could be a revolving door, because probably they would have had bookings as of March 16th, maybe for April, maybe for May, maybe for June. Maybe they're going to have cancellations. So it's sort of a rolling number. So as I said, one theory that's been talked about is just saying, okay, you can have 120 days because we're melding, we're molding in what you already had this year and what you already have booked, and recognizing that starting 2021, you're 90 days for that specific group of non-hosted rentals. Otherwise, I don't know how we manage it.
Yeah.
Well, why not 90 days? Forget about everything they had so far this year. Go 90 days forward to December 31st.
Well, but because there may be some that have already got more than 90 days booked, rented. I mean, you're coming into the summer, the fall season, and the Christmas season.
Actually, what Janet's suggesting is a little more conservative at one point. I mean, recognizing that we're halfway through the year, I had actually thought that maybe that 90-day maximum rental window for the non-hosted properties would be something we would have to start with the coming year, 2021. But so what Janet's outlining is somewhat more conservative because it would take into consideration rentals prior to our actually instigating this legislation.
Yeah, I think, and we talked about it while we were talking about this local law, but we never came to an answer as to, okay, are you grandfathered for what you've got? Are you grandfathered for what you had? Is it all bets are off and you can only have 90? As Peter said, I think we're kind of looking at it as a melding, as a ramping up for this year only.
And again, the reason this discussion is taking place now is that the town board is going to try to consider it. We're trying to be efficient, given the climate of meetings that we're involved with here, to not let this discussion drag out for 2 months.
Well,
Because the
give the
applications.
building office some guidance. As you probably all know, as of last week, they only had 12 applications, which is out of 600 or 700. It's unbelievable.
Well, it's kind of hard when the building's closed. Do they have an ability to apply online, I guess, would be like a,
Yeah.
they do?
Yeah.
And then it's a mailing, and then I guess I understand exactly where you're coming from, Janet, and it would make it seem to be a cleaner transition. I always was under the impression it was not 90 days from the moment it was filed with the Secretary of State, it became law.
Right. But we never took, I mean, we talked about it, but we never took into account, well, is it 90 new bookings? So let's say as of March 16th, they already had 60 days booked. Is it 60 plus 90? Is it a total of 90?
I understood it's 90 moving forward. That's what I understood. As soon as it became law, it was 90 moving forward. They kind of, if they were able to squeeze in whatever, then.
Or, I mean, so if they already had 90 days booked, they didn't get any more.
No, I can see where you're, but then they could apply 3 months or 90 days, which is 3 months, and then they'll have, if it's moving forward, then they'll have another 90.
Well, if, looking back,
They could essentially go to the rest of the year or whatever. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
the only other way to have done it would have been saying the clock started ticking the day the local law went into effect. So from March 16th, 2020 to March 15th, 2021, you got 90 days. But we set everything up on the calendar year. The local laws talks in terms of calendar year.
So Jason, to understand what I think I just heard you say, you would have assumed that the 90 days that they would have occupancy would start with the filing of the legislation, which was March 16th. Is that correct?
I guess I was talking it out. I guess they had 90 days to file a permit. And I guess that's where the, are you allowed to rent without a permit? So they shouldn't really have any bookings, or at least they should count them. But I understand from a clerical perspective how chaotic that might be.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
it's good. In retrospect.
It's gonna be
Janet?
tough. So that is a proposal out there to try. As I said, I'm looking at it as we've got a rational basis to recognize what people have already had in place while we institute and ramp in slowly this new local law. It doesn't mean they don't have to have a permit. They still have to meet all the safety requirements. It's just that we're going to recognize that you probably already had some people that stayed in calendar year 2020. You probably already had bookings for 2020, so we're giving you a little leeway.
Why don't we do 90 days from June 17th?
Well, remember, the June 17th is only the date by which you've got to have your permit. But the June 17th is only an enforcement date.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's what the town board is going to be discussing tonight, those two things. I thought it would be useful because they unlike our board who meets more frequently, are going to talk about this, and it would be good for us to, as somebody said, lead the discussion and say, yeah, this makes sense or doesn't make sense. Jason, I think you're the one that said we don't want them dictating the sidewalk color. Let's,
Yeah, they seem to, it's unfortunate from my perspective, and not speaking for the board, they seem to get out sometimes, and we kind of have to like acquiesce to them, or like they seem to leverage, where I feel
that's why this has all been hashed out, and I can honestly tell you that with regard to that 90 days, they were in a much different place. And in talking through it, I'll take credit, and you can blame me for this idea of, okay, let's just take the whole year and talk about 120. Because they were in a whole different, it was going to be a lot more.
We're at our 4 o'clock session where we all need to hang up and reconnect to the host compliance presentation. So do we have enough of a consensus, Janet, on that topic?
I guess I would want to go back maybe to what Peter is that like if they have 90 days from the summer, and I think that would identify moving forward, they have 90 days from moving
90
forward.
days till the end of the calendar year?
Yeah,
Yes.
That'd be okay?
Yeah.
I would go along with that.
But remember, if somebody's already has booked more than 90 days from March 16th forward, we cannot under the, I'll cite you, Article 1, Section 10 of the U.S. Constitution says we can't impair any contractual obligations, so we have to recognize those existing contracts.
Understand that, but we need to set something here that we can all agree on, and if 90 days from June 17th works, then I'm inclined to think till the end of the year that that's what we do. Granted, they may have had rentals earlier in the year. That's kind of forgiven.
How much did they really? Well,
Considering what's going on from March 17th till.
So you'll talk to the mayor about that.
Supervisor.
Supervisor, yeah.
Okay.
But on the septic, chimney, and site plan, we'll let those conditional permit.
Conditional permit would be the right way to go with, and we'll have to leave that to the discretion of Mike.
Can we just grant them is a conditional permit the same thing as maybe granting a waiver for a few months?
No,
is it just
no,
You have to get these things done, and if you don't get them done, then the permit expires.
Okay, I got it.
Okay.
On to the next one.
I'm going to ask you all to dial into the host compliance. You all have the information I think you need to do that.